Welcome back, and thank you for staying with KTN Prime. Now, of course, we want to dive into that conversation of the Kenya Kwanza administration turning two. And joining me for that particular discussion on my immediate right is Kevin Osido, Executive Director, County Governance Watch. And next to him, we have Frank Mukwanja, Executive Director, Center for Multi-Party Democracy. But before we get to that, let's just take a look at a scorecard of the Kenya Kwanza bottom-up economic transformation agenda pillars compiled by the Deputy Chief of Staff Performance Delivery Management, that is Eliud Owalo. And the scorecard highlights leaps in agriculture, health, housing, micro, small and medium enterprises, digital and creative economy sectors. So let's start with the agriculture sector. And what the government is saying is that the achievements that they have managed to achieve in the past 2 years is the fertilizer subsidy program, which they say involved digital registration of all farmers and subsequently making low-cost fertilizers available to them affordably to enhance food production. They're equally citing that the fact that they've been able to register 6.15 million farmers on that farmers digital platform. And of course, they're saying that maize production has increased in the country. And when it comes to improvement of key agricultural value chains, the government says it has removed VAT on teas purchased from local factories for value addition. The government equally says that it has distributed, 556 metric tons of sunflower seeds to 34 counties with further investment in seed multiplication and coconut cultivation, among others. Let's take a look at the MSME economy. And the achievements the government is saying is that it's been able to refurbish and equip all the CIDCs, that is the construction of county aggregation industrial parks, and of course the issues of the government has refurbished and equipped 21 county industrial development centers between 2022 and 2024. And of course the government equally says in 2022 it commenced and is in the process of constructing 19 county aggregation industrial parks countrywide. And of course the issue of financial inclusion, which it says it launched the Hustler Fund. When it comes to affordable housing, the government insists that it has increased the number of affordable housing units from 8,872 in 2022 to 103,000 in 2024. The government equally says that the total number of jobs created in the affordable housing project has increased from 17,744 in 2022 to around 140,610 in 2024. It equally says increase in mortgage refinancing has gone up by 40%, and of course the Jua Kali artisans have received prior learning assessment and recognition. When we look at the issue of the universal health coverage, the government says it's been able to establish a number of funds, of course, such as the Social Health Authority, which is supposed to replace the National Health Insurance Fund. And equally, the government says health products and technology, it has increased the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency's fill rate by 3%. From 59 in 2022 to 62% in 2024. Not forgetting about the community health, 20% increase in trained community health promoters and also health infrastructure. The government says there's been an increase in the number of level 4 hospitals as well as the increase in the number of level 5 and 6 hospitals. Let's talk about the digital superhighway or the creative economy, if you may like. The government says it has increased the fiber optic cable by 9,867 kilometers of fiber optic cable countrywide from the 8,900 kilometers in 2022. It also says it has established a number of Wi-Fi hotspots, 1,491 countrywide to be specific. And let's quickly dive into this conversation. Gentlemen, good evening, and thank you so much for making time for us here on KTN Prime. Perhaps, Frank, let me start with you. It's been 2 years of the Kenya Kwanza administration. From where you sit as a Kenyan, how would you rate this administration?
I think below average. and for good reasons. If you look at it from the sectoral approach that the new Deputy Chief of Staff, Eliud Owalo, has given us, we have many questions, but let me look at it from my own perspective. I think there is a point they're making in the agricultural sector. We have seen some effect. On a light note, of course, there's been good weather, which is very important. There's been sufficient rains, but that sufficient rains alone would not guarantee us the improvements we've seen. We must give them some, give President William Ruto and his team some credit for the thoughts about agriculture, particularly boosting the Agriculture Finance Corporation, I think by about 10 billion shillings, which has then enabled farmers to access some good credit. There's been some good level of effort in terms of weeding out the cartels in the coffee and the sugar sector, and then making sure that farmers are getting value for their products. And of course, some level of making sure that farmers are getting a subsidized fertilizer. There's been a challenge around distribution, about the quality. But then agriculture is the cornerstone of this country's economy. And therefore, if you want to do it better, and then you have to look at the whole chain, from farm inputs in terms of quality, in terms of cost, in terms of access, to, the produce. Are you doing value addition for the potatoes in Nyandarua, for the bananas in Kisii, or are we having an oversupply? And are you helping farmers with storage? Or do we still have some cartels who want to import sugar, who want to import maize and use the silos at the expense of farmers? Because wastage is a very key issue in terms of farm produce. And all this is critical. How are we even looking at the land, policy, sustainably, how are we using our land? The quality of fertilizer that is being put into, we're going to find ourselves in trouble in a few years. And also diversity of crops. This country does not have maize in the granaries. We are hungry when there is green gram all over, when there is, other crops. And we need to look at that. And so therefore, farm inputs all the way to storage, market access. The feeder roads today are in their worst situation. And that's where the farmers suffer, spillage and wastage. In terms of the economy, I think we have to give them some credit. I think the monetary policies have been sound enough, and that has brought the inflation down. But then when you look at it closer, it's good from far. But when you move nearer, it's far from good. Some of these economic policies, in my view, are still posing a lot of challenges to Kenyans. The interest rates are a problem. The cost of living is still high because of that. The public finance is an issue. We're still having challenges around budget and wastage, embezzlement, and they seem not to be issues that are concerning. When you look at the education sector, I think there's some thought into it, but then you shudder because there seem to be too many changes not well thought out. The issue was about CBC that he campaigned, got in, and they brought a whole new thinking about university education. On the other end, when you look at the government budget, there is not sufficient funds for capitation, and you begin asking yourself, where did this money go? Because there was much more capitation initially. Then when you look at healthcare, again, the universal health coverage is something that has faced a lot of legal challenges, and then you feel that is the political class within the ruling elite ignoring wise counsel from, experienced public servants and legal experts, because a lot of these policies are finding themselves challenged and slowed down. But again, if you look at the thinking that has gone into it, you realize that there are gaps, that perhaps there is a hurry to get out of the kitchen. And then you come out with a half-cooked meal that does not meet the legal threshold, does not make sound judgment in terms of the policy decision that was arrived at. And I think those are mixed bags, and you have to ask yourself, what then is the score? I think that's what makes me feel that it's below average. They would have done better, especially that President William Ruto is not a new kid on the block. He was deputy president for 10 years. Before that, he had served even in the Kibaki government as a minister. He's gone round those sectors: education, agriculture, office of the president. And these are things that personally expected that, being an insider, and he had really critiqued his boss, he would hit the ground running, but he's disappointed. Finally, my point is, what happened today? I expected that out of the complaints he had with the way he told us the boss had treated him, 2 years down the line, not even 2 years, just 1 year into government, and there's seemingly a lot of challenges with his boss, with his deputy, and all this maneuvering for impeachment, and then as keen political observers, we begin then to ask ourselves, who was the problem in this relationship? Was it him or was it the boss? Because with the boss, it lasted for a while. With his deputy, it is just not even the chicken have yet to come home to roost. The ink has not dried up on the outside side.
So he's the one who's common in both of the issues.
I think I'll leave that for Kenya.
Well, Osino, do you think it's below average or average perhaps?
In my view, it is way below average.
On a scale of 1 to 10, where does that leave that? 2, 1?
I would give Kenya Kwanza government 2 years down the line a D-. And that is purely because if you look at where we have started in terms of the scorecard that you read to us and to our listeners, we did not expect that the bottom-up economic transformation agenda would be an agenda that does not really cement the bottom, which is purely the foundation of everything. Largely, the economics of the country, the socio-cultural issues, and therefore, even the political aspects. So better has done better in the political aspect. And probably if I was to score the president politically, I would give him much more higher grades than what we are giving him from the expectations of Kenyans, based on the manifesto that he shared as a better agenda called BETA, B-E-T-A, Bottom-Up Economic Transformation Agenda. Politically, because he's been able to manage political parties, especially the opposition, Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga. Today, we don't know where Mheshimiwa Amolo Odinga, who for a long time has been the mouthpiece of the downtrodden Kenyans and people who probably have considered him as the person to go to when things are not working. And so the party that should have been ODM now has two dimensions. Here there is ODM in government and ODM out of government, largely because the president has played very well 2 years down the line compared to other presidents, because I think President Uhuru Kenyatta did this way late through the BBI into his presidency. But in terms of engaging the objectives of BETA, the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, the president, in my view, has missed the point. And one, that BETA's agenda or the objectives of this were one, to expand the tax base. How many countries, how many companies in this country have closed down and left? How many young people have not been able to get jobs 2 years down Kenya Kwanza's reign or administration, despite the constant reminders that we want to create jobs. We are doing everything to be able to make it easy for young people to get jobs. Instead, the conversation and the narrative is that we are opening up spaces for you abroad. In fact, even today, I read a statement from State House saying that the president has gone to Berlin to look for jobs for young people. But locally here, what really is happening is better making job acquisition and employment opportunities for young people better, because that really is the objective of better as an agenda for Kenya Kwanza. Issues around reduction of cost of living. Ashley and my good friend and brother, Frank, Kenyans are struggling. People are going through hard times in this country. And the reason why they gave President William Ruto so many votes compared to the other highest contender, as we were told by the Supreme Court, because this was a matter canvass at the Supreme Court, was because they believed in the agenda that Kenya Kwanza provided, that we will be able to deal with all these taxation issues, and that the clamor of families going without food, would come to an end. And as Frank rightfully said, and I agree with him, the president has been there for the longest time, in my view. 10 years as deputy president, being at the core of driving aspects that we expected as Kenyans, that now, 2 years down the line, we would be having much more stabilized families, where people would not be complaining over the cost of unga, and that people would be able to, at their localities, manage and take care of themselves based on government's economic policies, expansion of ease of doing business, and really expanding those opportunities for family heads and even those who've retired, elders, and the marginalized, or those who depend on government subsidies or funding that is coming from government to be able to sustain themselves, that would be so easy. But to a level where you still have elders, up to this weekend when I was in the village, and they were complaining, and these are people who depend on government to be able to transfer and transmit certain monies on a monthly basis to them. So the better agenda is properly crafted. It is easily spoken out there. It is easily communicated, particularly by the president. But in terms of the feelings of Kenyans on the ground, that agenda is not as is probably expected to be better. Okay. We had hoped that this agenda actually would make it easy for people to understand that government has contributed more in terms of poverty reduction. But at a wider scale, most of the issues that you referred to, again, are not the business of the president. Most of those functions are devolved functions, beginning with agriculture. The national government has very minimal, if not anything, to do with agriculture other than policies, agricultural policies. When we talk about fertilizer and farmers are complaining about fake fertilizers, it presents a concern that really should concern the president, that certain things are not going on well. Okay. A number of those better issues, housing is largely devolved. Housing and urban development.
Health as well.
Health is fully devolved, other than policy making for national government. So Kenya Kwanza government, 2 years down the line, should have provided a trajectory of ensuring that counties feel the power of what the Constitution actually aspired to give Kenyans as a dream, that I can easily get health care from wherever I am at the locality without necessarily having governments fighting over who should manage what and who should give us what kind of funding. So my rating is based on those observations without necessarily looking at what, in my view, if I were asked as a Kenyan, I would rate government based on 5 issues. Governance, issues around justice, are Kenyans able to get justice from where they are? Issues around law and order and security, so GJ laws. General and macro aspects of a government, as opposed to looking at detailed activities, so that we ask ourselves, has Kenya Kwanza empowered institutions of governance, like the National Police Service, to do its work? Why are Kenyans being abducted 2 years down the line and 14 years, 2 years into the administration of Kenya Kwanza, when the president promised that under my watch, these things will not happen?
Yes.
Why are we having the Inspector General of Police disobeying court orders 6 times? And this morning I was reminded that it is actually the 7th time under the watch of His Excellency the President, William Ruto, who actually said that I have gone through these issues And being as a stoic man as I am, with my ability to endure, I am coming into government and there shall be no repeat of this kind of issue. So
okay, and we'll get to
lots
those
of
issues,
concerns,
but I want you to, like, let's just go back to the campaign period, yeah? And I remember the president then said he will categorically, said he will not work with opposition. Here we are seeing a broad-based government, literally, let's say 1 and a few months, years down the line. What does this mean for democracy? And the reason why I'm asking this is because when you meet Kenyans out there, they are asking, why should I go and vote if the two top contenders at the end of the day will meet and, you know, have a handshake, have a broad-based government, nusu mkate, you name it. It's become a trend right now. Frank?
Yeah, several points. One is that the elites, the political elites in this country, have a very interesting unwritten rule that whenever the interests are threatened by the hoi polloi, they narrow the gap between them. They have determined that the peace or lack of it should be a settlement of the elite interests. And it became rather very obvious that when President William Ruto was pushed in a corner, the only way to react to that was to throw some slices to his political nemesis and try to calm. But these people are one and the same. Number two is, you will recall the vetting of the current Treasury CS. And it was clear that there is nothing philosophically different between ODM and UDA. And that speaks to my third point. Then do Kenyans require a credible, viable alternative? And therefore, I tend to tell the younger generation that were on the streets demonstrating a lot of courage, demonstrating a lot of willingness to blur the tribal lines that have defined our politics for a long time, that it was fashionable to say that we are a tribe, we are partyless, we are leaderless. This country has a shortage of leaders. This country has a shortage of credible, viable alternative. And it is a real embarrassment to my good friends in the Orange Democratic Movement to say the things that they do. That you can actually have your cake and eat it. It is bad manners of the highest order that you don't even want to shut your mouth when it is full. And it's going to be a very convoluted and obnoxious way of looking at things. And there is need, and we know that we have challenges in the way we are set up as a governance system.
Yeah.
That the presidential system that we have with a minority and majority arrangement is raiding in nature. And we will continue seeing these kind of actions whenever the ruling party is cornered. Because actually, if you go down to the basics, Kenya Kwanza was a minority government. That the raiding started even just before the Supreme Court made their decisions. And in a society where social welfare dispensation defines politics, a society where the politician has to continuously interface with the populace to maintain their favorability, and not about how they are representing, how they are legislating, and how they are oversighting their three critical functions. It is going to continue. But then we must rise up to the level of saying, when are we going to improve the quality of the citizen so that they can be able to demand that the moral and social standards of our leadership increases, so that they can ask and demand accountability to the leaders, so that then the leaders can be shy from making unnecessary blunders. It is going to be difficult. This has to be demand-driven. It has to be a citizen agency, because in terms of power, we can see clearly that it is very much enjoyed. People are getting into government for power, for office, for money, for privileges to influence and patronage, you know, we can see that money is playing a significant role in making sure that even legislators are getting confused with money. Parliamentary groups happen at State House for a reason. Because people want to whisper to the president, you know, something to offer them goodies. And when they come, they vote like cows, and some of them have confirmed that they are indeed cows. But that pressure that makes the elected leaders to want to think, what was I sent to this August House to do, is very critical. And then we look at the institutions that Kevin is mentioning. The Constitution 2010 set up independent offices and constitutional commissions. We got the footing wrong by electing the government that we elected in 2013 and the many mistakes that we have done, because I don't believe that the governments of 2013 up to date were believers in the new dispensation. That is why they are unable to breathe the spirit, to breathe life into the words of the Constitution.
Okay.
That blatant disregard for the rule of law. And if you look at how to tackle these three issues of power, money, and strong institutions without civic agency, without the people driving that demand, we will not be able to protect institutions. We will not be able to stop the negative influence of money in our governance spheres. We will not be able to prevent the abuse of power. And that is just how things should be done so that we can rectify the anomalies in our democracy.
Looking at what he's said, won't it take a lot, considering, number one, as a nation, we always forget. We will lament together over the 5 years. When it comes to the ballot, everyone goes back to their tribal lines. Number two, even as we try and, you know, bring new crop of leaders to the government, let's not forget about, you know, once I'm in that office, I start acting like those who are in that office. How do we break that cycle?
That cycle can be broken, actually. And in fact, the recent activities that we have seen in our political context and even economic really present some lessons to be learned, particularly by the political elite or the political class. The Gen Zs taught us that really you can complain, lament, and do something about those complaints and lamentations, and that you can organize around an agenda which is beyond tribal cocoons or tribal inclinations. And they actually helped us understand that once we identify an agenda which is beyond tribe, it doesn't matter who is running behind that agenda, as long as the national interests or the interests of the nation are put forward. And that kind of organizing really brought tremendous results. One, a finance bill was actually squashed and quashed even before the court of law said it. Preceding that, we also saw the 2023-2024 finance bill being declared unconstitutional, purely based on citizen organizing and citizen agency. Now, it therefore means, and in addition to that, the president actually dissolved his cabinet based on clamor and cries.
And reshuffled some of the same old faces.
Because governance has failed to work. That accountability and transparency that we called for and that Kenyans are calling for is not a priority. And you see why that is happening is because of the question that you're asking and that we are trying to engage with. The moment we forget or do not desire to delink politics from governance, okay? And that I can be a very good politician preceding an election, but beyond being sworn in and considering that I am a president of everyone and of a nation, then the politics should stay aside. That is the biggest contributing factor to the reason why negative ethnicity, tribalism, is playing a very critical role. And I wish to add that to the 3 points that Frank is mentioning, that it's about power, it's about money, it's about institutions, and then it's about your tribe. And if you went to where I come from, for example, there's a lot of excitement that now we have a few of us Luos, quote in quote, if you were to walk in the streets and say, now Luos are very happy because they are in government, it means that your tribe, we are being taught to realize that you can only be perfect in government when you have a tribal kingpin in government. But yet, that governance requires that you look beyond tribe and ethnic conclaves, yeah? And that you can be whatever tribe you are and serve everyone equally without necessarily putting your tribe ahead. But in a context where money, plays a very critical aspect in terms of how many votes I garner to be elected the person who makes the decision, hence the spirit of tribalism, of negative ethnicity. That for places where you cannot be able to transact using money, you transact therefore using the number of people that you can mobilize into your ethnic basket and present to the winning candidate and say, this is what I am offering you. Now, what the Gen Z is, despite the challenges that I agree with Frank, that talking leaderless, tribeless, the beauty about all that is tribelessness. Yeah. But leaderlessness does not help anyone. That is the reason why they have none of them, even in cabinet, yet they had the best opportunity. Okay. So to a level where actually we can begin to organize around issues and concerns that therefore give us a much more better space as Kenyan citizens and not as tribes of the people of the Republic of Kenya, we stand better chances to score higher points. And in scoring higher points, it means that we will not be very keen to look at which tribe does the president come from? Where does my governor come from? Even at the county levels, we are seeing these emerging avenues of marginalization and discrimination up to the clan level and sub-clan level, where people are told, you're not a member of our clan, you will not be in the county executive committee as a cabinet, as a CC member. Or, these chief officers, none of you contributed any votes to us because of your clan, so we cannot appoint any of you. And those are corners that Kenyans are being pushed to by the people who imagine that they have the political and ethnic power to do so. Okay. But let me just finish by saying that what we have seen happening in the most recent past is that actually we can identify a common feature of being patriotic Kenyans other than being ethnically inclined to any political candidate. And once we do that, then the possibility of even picking people who don't belong to our tribes to lead very critical aspects in governance become much more higher. There's a reason why the president picked Mheshimiwa Mbadi from ODM and the Luo community to be in treasury. There's a reason why a few of them were picked, and there's a reason why parties organized to present candidates. Yeah. And this is purely because the president is keen to look at how do I transcend this narrative around a one-term president, because that was very common during the Gen Z demonstrations, and people were calling him, oh, wewe tumemalizana na wewe, you are a one-term president. But he knows that if I can be able to organize a few tribesmen and women from a few corners of the country and bring them into government, I can be assured that in 2027 I can have good votes to guarantee me a second term.
All right, gentlemen, we're out of time, but in 30 seconds each, if we can, perhaps Frank, let's start with you. If you were to meet with President William Ruto right now, what advice would you give him? 30 seconds.
I would tell him to stop being a politician and lead.
That's
politician deals, a leader provides solutions.
A leader leads.
What about you, Sid?
Precisely, a politician deals, and we are seeing so many deals, a Adani deal, what deal, and a leader leads. But much more fundamentally, as Kenyan citizens, please exercise citizen agency and hold our governments accountable up to the levels where we are.
All right, thank you so much, gentlemen. Kevin Osido, Executive Director, County Governance Watch, and Frank Mukwanja, Executive Director, Center of Multi-Party Democracy. We take a short break. I'll be back with more news updates. Another break ahead in business news. Government to conduct public participation in a bid to promote trade and investments.